Professor Saroj Mahananda, Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed, please. Finally, after time that maintain the oxygen its maximum.
Thank you, Chair, and the panelists, distinguished speaker, and guests, the researcher who has been the city. Good afternoon to everyone. I'll be talking about a very small country in Africa, that is Malawi. Malawi is a very small country, it's near to Mozambique and bordering Tanzania, and also on the on the western side is Zambia. I was fortunate enough to visit in 2022. Where I did my field visit, and I interviewed Indian community as well as local African community as well. So from my personal experience and observation, also the interview I did in 2022, on the basis of those experiences, I'd like to mention about how this community has gone through different phases, historical context as well as the present dynamics, and also India's involvement. India's diasporic relations. Already here during the inaugural session, how Indians were taken from India to for the labor as a labor migrants to Bermudian countries or as well as African countries. Particularly in 1894, a lot of Indians were recruited to construct the Uganda Railway and other public roads, but mainly from the Punjab and Sindh regions. But most of the free immigrants that they came from Gujarat, Kachiwara, the Saurashtra, Kutch, and Maharashtra as well. Some also immigrated from Portuguese Goa as well. These people became mainly the shopkeepers and civil servants of the East Africa, East African country. After the British, the present Malawi was a part of the British Nyasa land, which was a product way. So it was a group of countries, a group of say nation, it was called as Nyasa land. And the Nyasa land was basically under that under British. So Indians were basically treated as a middleman during that time. So basically the theory that emerged later on in 1970s, but the term that was specifically used for the Indians of immigrant communities in Malawi. The middleman minority community is basically serving the purpose between the British ruling class as well as the people who were at the bottom, that is African. So they serve that. And during the 60s and 70s, that middleman community also served a lot of challenges. Had a lot of challenges. When we just example, in 1970 or 60, we saw the Uganda genocide, but a lot of Indians were killed. Also, we have to note that the Indian term that is used in Malawi, the Indian term, it is used for Pakistanis as well as Sri Lankans and all the people. They were included in that term. So sometimes they use the term Asian is used, sometimes the Indian is used. When we talk about Indian, it means before independence, before partition, that those Indians, which include Pakistan and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka as well. That community actually went through a lot of difficult phases. When we talk about that, one of the examples of that was Forfeiture Act 1966, where this community actually went through a lot of challenges, where a lot of Asian businesses were basically forfeited, and also a lot of Indians were forced from rural areas, because most of the Indians that time they were controlling the business in the local areas, rural areas. They were forced to move to urban centers, and they have to leave their businesses. So these were the challenges the Indian community particularly went through that. And Malawi was after the independence, Malawi was going through that phase of dictatorship. So that dictatorship somehow has an impact on Indian community as well. And a lot of Indians particularly, they were served with this Forfeiture Act. And after that, till 1993 and 94, when Malawi went for its first election, and this dictatorship ends there, and a lot of Indian actually played a very important role in this democratic process, and as well as the election process. And a lot of Indians, particularly one of the very famous lady from Bombay, actually, she joined the first this electoral observer group in Malawi, Dr. Nandini Patel. Probably some of you might have heard about her. And later she was the first one who established the first political science department in Malawi. She became the torchbearer for Malawi for the elections, democracy, and the democratization. Coming back to India's relations, particularly when we talk about 1994 onwards, because due to lack of time, India started this diplomatic relations after the Malawi's independence in 1964, and in 1993, this Malawi High Commission in Malawi was closed. Though India continued diplomatic relations with Malawi, Malawi was concurrently extradited to a mission in Zambia until February 2012. The resident mission was reopened in March 2012, and Malawi opened its mission in Delhi in February 2007. And in the past 10 years, we saw a lot of Indians, particularly VIP visits from India to Malawi, which highlights the India's interest in Africa, as well as India's futuristic vision that India wants to build the relation with Africa. India's bilateral relations, which has been into capacity building, that is human resource development, where Indian government is providing scholarship opportunities to a lot of Malawi. There is 130 slot every year to Malawi under IPEC program. 800 Malawi nationals from both government and private sectors have been trained in India in various fields. 100 students from Malawi have pursued their higher education in various institutions. Another project, there was Pan-Africa E-Network project. The multi-million-dollar Pan-Africa E-Network project was set up at Chancellor College, Zomba, Malawi. I was fortunate enough to visit that college and saw the progress that India made in Africa and particularly Malawi. The project commenced in August 2010 and concluded in March 2017. Almost 2,000 Malawians were benefited from that project, the Pan-Africa E-Network project. Since the government launched E-Vidya Bharati, Vidya Bharati E-Weber project in India, that is January 2020, more than 600 students were awarded scholarships to pursue short-term undergraduate and postgraduate courses. So this is one aspect of India's bilateral relations. Another aspect is development projects that India served through lines of credits, grants, business incubation centers, cotton, technical assistance program, cooperation in mining, cooperation in power sectors, international solar alliances, and as well as cultural relations. When we talk about Indian community in Malawi, it's not just a community that is from Gujarat, and also there's two phases of migration. One was that during the colonial era. Okay. So the time is very short. I just like to wrap it up. But during the diversity of Indian community that is currently there's 15 association of Indian diaspora. That is, one is Tamilian, Malayali diaspora association, Gujarati, Marathi, and there's like a lot of diversity is there. But when it comes to celebrating India's culture, whether it's Independence Day, whether it's a new diaspora, it's an old diaspora, they all come together and celebrate India's culture and India's diversity. Thank you very much.
Bharat Mata ko naman. Respected chair, fellow panelists, office bearers and members of Rashtriya Suraksha Jagran Manch, friends in audience, namaskar. So my topic of today today is strategizing India-Sudan cooperation in India's Indo-Pacific policy. To make this short and brief, I have divided my small talk in 4 parts. So, in first part, we will be talking about India's Indo-Pacific policy. What are the major features and parts of India's Indo-Pacific policy? In the second, we will talk about India's engagement with Africa as a continent. And from there, we will move to part 3, in which we will talk about the role of Sudan, in which I am specifically focusing. And in last part, which is also the main part, we will talk about way forward, that what can be done in future and what are the possible things we can do. So, talking about first India's Indo-Pacific policy. So, it was in 2018 during Shangri-La dialogue that our Prime Minister laid down the India's vision of Indo-Pacific policy. In that policy, our Prime Minister laid down 5 principles of Panchamrit. These Panchamrit stands for 5S. These are Samman, Samvad, Sahyog, Shanti and Samriddhi. That is respect, dialogue, cooperation, peace and prosperity. So in the Indo-Pacific region, these are the 5 major principles which will be adhered by the Indian government in Indo-Pacific region. And as rightly pointed out by respected General K.V. Singh sir in the morning, the Indo-Pacific region which India considers is from the eastern coast of Africa till the Australian island chain. So this is the Indo-Pacific region which we in India consider part of our Indo-Pacific policy. And as stated earlier, the policy is based upon the idea of Panchamrit 5S. Now moving on to the India's Africa engagement. So in the same year, in the year 2018, it was during the Prime Minister's speech in Kampala, in which our Prime Minister laid down the principles of engagement with Africa. There are total 10 principles in number. The broad aim of these principles are that Africa will be top priority for India. Development partnership will be guided by priorities of African nations. India will keep its market open and make it easier and more attractive for African nations to trade with India. The fourth point is India's experience with digital revolution. You all have seen the recent pictures of a person doing UPI at Eiffel Tower. We will be spreading this digital revolution in the parts of Africa. The next is work on improving Africa's agriculture. Partnering with Africa to address the challenge of climate change. As we all know that climate change is an existential crisis for whole of humanity. So we will be specifically dealing and aiming to manage climate change. The next is strengthening cooperation and mutual capabilities in combating terrorism and extremism, along with supporting the UN in advancing and keeping peace. This broad area I will be delving into further later on. Next is work with African nations to keep open and free oceans for the betterment of all nations. The next point is ensure that global engagement in Africa is in such a way that Africa does not once again turn into a theater of rival ambitions, but become a nursery for aspirations of African youth. I would like to lay emphasis on a recent statement by our Prime Minister, in which Prime Minister said that war is not a solution to any problem. And keeping this idea forward, our Foreign Minister has said that the 20th century concepts cannot be applied in the 21st century. The whole concept of balance of power, the alliances, these are 20th century concepts which should not be used in 21st century paradigm. So these are the major pillars of our India's Africa engagement. And in order to give a word to it, it is based by the SALA doctrine, which says that security and growth for all in the region. Now coming to the role of Sudan. So Sudan is basically located at a very geostrategic location, which is in and around Red Sea. So in 2014, a document was presented by the Indian Navy. It aimed at providing the security strategy of naval security strategy of India. And in that naval security strategy, Indian Navy have highlighted that India has some primary areas of concern. And one among those primary areas of concern is the Red Sea region. And as I third largest economic power. And we want to be an export-oriented power. In order to be an export-oriented power, we also need to ensure security of sea lines of communication. Recent events adjoining Red Sea, we have seen that how the shipping lines were attacked by terrorists, some rebel groups. So this also highlights how India needs to act actively, proactively rather, in this region, so that our export, our trade, and our vision to become a developed nation by 2047 is intact. Also, India is also the net security provider in the region. Be it the tsunami of 2004, be it any earthquake, be it water crisis in Mali, or be it any other crisis in the region. India has the image to be the first responder. India is a responsible power which helps its neighbors and nations in the proximity without expecting any returns from them. During COVID time, it was Sagar, under the Operation Sagar, in which India provided free vaccines to the African nations, including Sudan. Now coming to the fourth part about strategizing this relation so that in order to achieve our aims and objectives. So India have a quiet alliance, that is I2U2. India, Israel, USA and UAE. Recently, recently 2 years back, Sudan have normalized its relations with Israel. And under I2U2 nations are focusing on few concerned areas. Two among them are food security and clean energy. I2U2 nations can collaborate and implement these two aims in Sudan also. Similarly, China is the dragon in the room. China is having its naval bases in the region, Djibouti for example. So India can partner with Sudan in order to have, if not a military base, but to have cooperation with them. Things like maritime domain awareness, military exercises in order to undertake HADR operations. These are the future, and these are in line with the vision which have been provided by the leadership of Indian government. So on that note, I end this talk. In case anyone have any question, we'll take it. Thank you.
Next speaker is Dr. Jetty. He will be talking on line. So I would like to request Dr. Jetty to kindly start the presentation.
Distinguished guests, greetings from South Africa. In my presentation, I shall highlight a few important themes in the Indian story. And this is especially concerned with the link between India and Africa, the core imaginary, which is the role of the sea or the ocean as an important theme or motif in ancient history. And in our case, with Africa and India, it's the Indian Ocean. And then the question that underlies the Indian story, wherever we are is the question of where is home. I will briefly share a few stories in the time that I have been given with poems I have composed to give you a broad picture of the Gibraltar experience in South Africa, at once quite unique and also similar to the global arena. I am a child of indenture. I was born in the north coast of Natal, which is about 60 miles from Durban, where the early sugar and tea and coffee plantations were developed through the work of the Indian indentured laborers who came to South Africa. My maternal grandmother came with her family in 1904 from Andhra Pradesh in India to work at Hewlett's estate, a name in South Africa that is synonymous with sugar. My grandmother began working immediately as a child laborer. She was 7, picking tea leaves in the fields and then later drying and scaling the leaves in the factory for transport to India to be made into Ceylon tea. That's my grandmother there on the right, when she was in her older years. If you went to Kersney today, you will see the ruins of the old tea factory where my grandmother worked. Having crossed the Kalapani, my grandmother never came back or went back to India, living in a state of temporariness, familiar temporariness, as V.S. Naipaul says in A House for Mr. Biswas. And she became part of the company of permanent sojourners in South Africa, the land of her adoption. In this poem for my grandmother, I go like Alice Walker, the feminist writer from the United States, in search of my grandmother's garden. And I offer this to you with love. The old tea factory in Kersney, Natal. The light streams through the cracks, haunting lines, specters, shards of memory, dancing patches on the crumbling walls, sunlight on a broken column, derelict and silent, stone bodies on the coolie lines. A sad, lonely mango tree, a neglected hibiscus, marigolds under the thicket choking, and pride of India in need of pruning. Only the eternal bees and butterflies. Your sari hitched to your waist, you toil from morning till sunset. The open spaces of the hills and dales, your allotted prison under the African sky. Nimble fingers picking leaf by leaf by leaf, you become lettered in the ways of the fields, reading the hills and dales, writing your name in the wind, wafting it across the seas. The lush green hills of leaves hoisted up, spread out to dry on shelves lined with hissing. You turn the leaves, hour by hour by hour, to catch the rays of the African sun. You work for a shilling a month. You look wistfully at the rows of wooden boxes filled with leaves, dried, draped, to begin their journey across the billowy seas to the soil of your heart, your hearth, your home. The leaves, you see your fingers fingering the leaves. The African sun sealed within. Your hands reach out to the boxes, the boxes. A long shadow is cast over the hills and valleys of Kersney, abandoned by history. Across the Kalapani to the hills of Gazwada in Andhra Pradesh, the river Krishna, flowing old and languid, catches images fleeting of the old tea factory under the African sun. Dancing on the waters of the hills and valleys in Durban is working on making that a UNESCO heritage site. My next portrait is of a different kind of person, Voti Veerama Sumaya, and she came from India. Her story is contained in this book, and it deals with the kind of life she had to lead. If my grandmother was a unit of labor, a woman like Voti Veerama Sumaya was an object of sexual exploitation. She traveled by ship as a single woman, but life was not smooth sailing for her. Her story inside Indenture gives us another angle to the Gilbertia experience. We tend to romanticize the camaraderie on the ship when we speak of ship brothers and ship sisters, Jahaji Bai and Jahaji Bihan. But Voti's experience was not quite as good as that. When Voti arrived in Durban Harbour, she had to connect with the man on the ship and went to work with him at Ifafa Beach, which is on the Natal south coast. Kersney, where my grandmother lived, is on the Natal north coast, and Voti went to the south coast. She found the same treatment of exploitation, of abuse on the sugar plantations as well. Then, ironically, there were white male saviors or protectors in the colony who also took advantage of her in the guise of protecting her from brown men. The irony is that the absence of kin and kinship and networks was debilitating as well as enabling for many women. In the case of Voti, it gave her a sense of independence, but it also made her more vulnerable. And so I share her poem, and I've drawn from the information in the historian's book inside Indenture. From the obscure village of Naransanapeta in the south, you traveled across the churning black waters, coolie woman adrift, seeking to write your own story. Under the relentless sky, solitary, Voti Veerama, forever tossed on the high seas, stretched on the back of patriarchy, goddess Lakshmi rising from the sea, watching over you, now benignly, now indifferently. You strain against the cage of the plantation, at Ifafa by the sea, bound to your shipmates, their fates entwined with yours. You are not free to live alone, love alone, worthy only as an appendage, docile body, with a man beside you. Why is Goddess Lakshmi so silent when your dowry is penury, rationed into bondage for a pittance, desired and defiled, punished because you're a woman? Voti Veerama, you are Shakti, choosing prison again and again. You show your steel, refusing the pottage of your protectors, white men protecting you from brown men in the contagion of misogyny that knows no bounds. Pilloried and tossed to and fro, bruised and battered, you refuse to succumb. On a gusty day, I hear your prayer, the dunes of Ifafa, flying over land and sea, on the wings of Shakti, flowers in your hair. You refuse to be subdued as you tear yourself loose from the bonds of your funeral pyre. You rise from the womb of the sea, reborn, with your hands outstretched, reaching the ends of the earth. My next story is of Maestri. And the story of Maestri is also the story of two unnamed women in his life. His wife, whom he leaves behind, ocean. It's the call of the sugarcane fields, the waves of the sugarcane fields.
Dr.
It's
Reddy.
the call of his return to the servitude, to the slave. And in conclusion, I should like to read two important poems that I composed to celebrate the anniversary of the arrival of Indians in South Africa, the Gilmitias, and this was written for the 150th anniversary on the 16th of November 2010. Tumbling from the great gaps in India to beholding places in Port Natal, ushered in by the capricious tide, crossing the Kalahari, children of the rain and storm, buffeted by waves, stitching fragments of stealth, patched together in the waters of the voyage, finding anchors in the wind, fated to be vagabonds of identity, their histories sinewed to their bones, tilling in Cooney cane fields, learning the language and law of foreign shores, toiling for tea for empire, castaways, stone bodies in compounds, preserving the ancient heart with laddus and rasgulas, the remembrance of things past, lighting the family godland with suppliant hands, watched by the stars, working with new kids and kin for freedom to sprout on parched land, mingling blood and water to forge a new people, a new heaven and a new earth, heaving the sheaves of yesterday, this harvest of memory, new beatitudes for our time and place. And so in many ways, Gilmitian workers came to South Africa and began to adopt South Africa as their home and began to work for freedom in our land. And finally, I'd like to share a poem that I composed a few months ago, which was again on the 16th of November. We had a very sacred memory, a sacred ceremony when we went to the sea and we offered marigolds to the sea. Marigolds by the sea. We gather at the water's edge. The milky sea above beholds the human tableau as the wind blows sand in our faces and the incessant waves waft in, waft out. Ancient sea stories wash across the shore, mingling with histories of the land. Billows of sugarcane, heaving, breaking, crashing in motion. We gather today to offer marigolds to the Indian Ocean, the seas that churned our ancestors to the land, scattered as the gales of continents in the currents of colonies. Our oblations of gold are buffeted by the winds. Our histories crash, collide, merge as seagulls fly. We are of the earth and sky and air and fire. Our homage of gold, flotsam and jetsam under the heavens, ceaselessly rising and falling in the sacred dance of remembrance. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Reddy. Now the next speaker is Dr. Anil Kumar.
We have with us Professor Saroj Mahananda. If he could come on the stage, please. Sir.
Very well, good afternoon, all of you. Respected Chairman of the session, Vajpayee sir, Alan Visa, distinguished guests, fellow panelists, and my dear students. I am presenting before you with a topic China's quest for a new order in Africa and its implications over India. I will do one thing, I will summarize my arguments and I will read it, then I will explain each point separately. And my paper basically reflects on China's quest to create a new order in Africa by creating a favorable political narrative, economic infrastructural engagement, strategic military presence and partnership. It also traces its strategic implications over India and unravels its difference with China's approach towards Africa. African countries have occupied a central position in Beijing's efforts to enhance its global influence, and it launched many efforts to transform Africa as a testing ground for its governance of a state-led economic system. It attempted preferential access to Africa's natural resources, opening up the market for its exports and African support for Chinese diplomatic priorities on and beyond the continent. Its multifaceted engagement with Africa ranges basically from major infrastructure investments to establishing its first overseas military base in the country, Djibouti. Its military presence as part of UN peacekeeping operations and its expanded influence over African commodities via strategic direct investments in oil fields, mines and production facilities alongside resource-backed loans requiring commodity-based payments create many concerns. China's financing, characterized by opacity and stringent terms, raises apprehensions regarding economic exploitation, dependency and political coercion. Their involvement in African elections and military coup in some parts, promotion and training for African journalists for shaping narratives and perceptions in favor of China are some other ways of attempts to create a new order in Africa. Along with this, China's geostrategic involvement creates a lot of strategic concerns for India in the context of conflicting and competing strategic relations between both. India aims to bolster its strategic interest in Africa by establishing a significant business and economic presence, ensuring domestic energy security and enhancing its position in the international governance framework. China's continuous efforts to strengthen and increase defense cooperation with the African Union nations compel India to have a well-calibrated approach and efforts to compete effectively while respecting the sensitivities and interests of the African states. India positions itself as a champion of the global south, advocating for the inclusive and less exploitative approaches for the shared prosperity. At the 18th G20 summit in Delhi, India's efforts led to the African Union's induction as a permanent member, highlighting its commitment to diverse representation. India emphasized the importance of inclusive decision-making for the planet's future. Similarly, at the 15th BRICS summit in Johannesburg, India promoted Africa's sustainable development and supported the inclusion of Egypt and Ethiopia as new members. Amid concerns over China's economic partnership model leading to debt trap scenarios, several African countries are exploring alternatives and collaborating with India. And hence, we can see that while going through all these points, China exerted their influence in the African region through militarily, economically, politically and strategically. First they have imported a particular kind of China's strategy in the African region by creating alliances with the different partners in that region. And through regional and international institutions also, they have expanded their influence. Again, they expanded their influence through exporting an authoritarian model, through deepening influence through political and ideological training, enlisting African support for Beijing's global diplomatic goals, and Beijing intervenes in Africa's domestic politics even to further its interest. And again they intervened in shaping several kinds of narratives. Through that way they are overcoming many kinds of challenges, ideological which are basically erupting from that region. And Beijing's concerted effort to penetration in African media is also very important that we should take into account in this context. And regarding economic activity, we are very much familiar because China's infrastructure building in the region through financing and it created several concerns, and role of Africa in the growing depth of Africa is also a thing that we should keep in mind. And in the technological aspect, while we are thinking, we can see that they are interested to create they are creating a digital Silk Road in Africa, and through that they are expanding their technological footprint. And of course, we can see that even through their security presence, through UN peacekeeping operations force, and again through their new military base, we can see that, and in the growing arms market, their role is increasing. And throughout these ways, we can see that they are militarily intervening in that region. Regarding their strategy in the beginning, we can see that Chinese Communist Party actively supported various national liberation movements in Africa to advance its broader strategy of establishing Beijing as a leader of the global communist movement. We can see that even China's foreign ministers have chosen African countries as their first overseas trips since continuously from 1991. And in 2006 white paper, they have very clearly remarked that their strategy is a new type of strategic partnership with Africa. But they changed a little bit in 2015 by telling that they wanted to create, or they wanted to elevate that position to a status of a comprehensive strategic partnership. In addition to China intended to have preferential access to continent's natural resources using free trade zones to circumvent US and European Union trade quotas, opening up African countries as markets for Chinese exports, and then enlisting African support for Chinese global diplomatic board, such as generating support for China's Belt Road initiative. Now China blends all of its tools, national power, political, economic and military, to accomplish these objectives. And China implemented the African strategy through reliance upon key strategic partners. We can see that they engaged very strongly with Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania in East Africa, Angola, Mozambique, Namibia, South Africa and Zimbabwe in Southern Africa, Egypt and Sudan in North Africa, Guinea and Nigeria in West Africa. So we can see that in all these places, they are engaging militarily, economically and politically. And we can see that through regional cooperation, through the Forum on Africa-China cooperation, they are engaging very strongly to implementing their core interest. And we can see that beyond this China-Africa cooperation, they are also using African Union, Economic Community of West African States, etc., for implementing their objectives. And one very important thing is that even these kinds of institutions and their builder, they are using even to prevent the kind of criticisms are erupting from these countries against China. Best example is that even some of the countries in Africa, they have signed a memorandum and supported China in their policy towards Uyghurs in Xinjiang people their country. So we can see that through this ideological, they are also giving ideological training to Communist Party people, and they are also controlling the media. They are infiltrating, they are giving training to media people from African region, and they are also giving special training for the political party representatives, and they are also supporting many coup in African region, different parts of African nations. And again we can see that they are also working with military in achieving certain objectives in that region. So we can see that in all the ways they are attempting. I'm taking one more minute. Now, what is the difference between India and China in that format? The difference is that actually India is having a more inclusive approach. And nowadays, I was discussing with some of the panelists, and I was asking why, now the people in Africa are more lenient towards India. They are telling that they are having more confidence in India. They are looking at, in morning they are telling that all the infrastructure they are building in different parts of the country are creating many criticisms. If suppose they are creating a road, it will finish within 2-3 months. So like that, their work is futile in many ways. But at the same time, from the Indian side, we are genuinely participating with them. We are promoting the interest of both the nations, and we don't have any kind of hidden, strings attached with each policy India is following towards that region. That is the major difference. More than that, we should understand that India is having a very good understanding about history, and we both are fight against colonialism. We shared many histories. So we both believe that these colonial nations, once they were the colonies, and they have got shared prosperity, and if they cooperate mutually, they can do better than any other country in the world involved in that region. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Dr. Vinny Sharma.
Before that, I would like to introduce the speaker. Now we just a piece of information. We have with us Professor Saroj Kumar Mehnanda. He is a professor in Department of English, Jamia Millia Islamia, and his area of interest is Dalit historiography, Oriya poetry, and marginality studies. Recently, he is working on folk literature. So I would like to request Dr. Inderpreet to come and felicitate him. Please.
Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Vinny Sharma from Amity University, Noida, and my paper is exploring Indian-African collaboration through the E-Vidya Bharti and E-Arogya Bharti project. So my specific area is to just check the E-Vidya Bharti and Arogya Bharti project and what are their initiatives for maintaining a balance and a co-relationship between India and Africa. So I will just make out basic or brief points from my paper. So this research paper explores the collaboration, as we have said, that between India and Africa through E-Vidya Bharti and Arogya Bharti project. And this paper aims to understand the impact of this digitalization and this initiative on the educational and health sector in Africa, and how it has fostered Indian-African relationship using the mixed method approach, where we are focusing on the qualitative and the quantitative approach for analyzing the paper and just to understand the relationship between them. When we talk about E-Vidya Bharti and Arogya Bharti project, it is a digital initiative. As we know that Government of India has introduced this initiative for strengthening the relationship between India and Africa. And this is launched in 2018, but before that it was also available. So we will discuss about its evolution and detail as well. And it provides a free access to the education and health services within the African countries through digital platform. So this paper explores this collaboration and its impact on Africa and its significance in Indian-African relationship. When we talked about India-African collaboration, which has a long history with partnership in various sectors, including trade, education, health, and technology. And recent years have been served in digital collaboration, with E-RAB project being a prime example, and this paper is focusing more on this project only. So several studies have highlighted the potential of digital initiatives in fostering the international relationship between improving the access to essential services. However, there is a group or a gap between the literature review where we cannot find much details about the project. But initially when we explored, so we brought a detail from the governmental sites, and even I can proudly say that being an Amity, we are also collaborating and providing services to our students, to African students through this project only. So we are also associated with E-Vidya Bharti. So this This research paper presents a comprehensive analysis and the E-Vidya Bharati and Arogya Bharati project, an initiative to epitomize the collaborative spirit of India's development within the Ministry of External Affairs and implemented by Telecom Consultant of India Limited, TCIL. The project aims to leverage digital technology to bridge the access gap and drive the sustainable development. As you know that while talking about United Nations and organization, we focus more on the sustainable development. And this is one of the major important area where online we are focusing and providing services to the other countries. And one of the major factors which we can find is the education and the health sector, where India is making a better relationship with the African countries, not only providing the resources, but technology and innovative ideas as well. So when we talk about this paper, I can say that this paper is structured into achieve the three major primary objectives within this paper. And you can find that first objective is to identify, to understand the key stakeholders, who are those, what are their involvement, instrumental and mechanism driving the India's digital development through the outreach of Africa. Secondly, this paper also focuses to investigate the localized solutions developed by Indian grassroots and organizations and their subsequent application in the African context within the broader framework of India's developmental cooperation. And when we talk about the third important objective, it is to critique the fragmented nature of India's experiences in designing development assistance with a focus on EVAP project. So this paper majorly evaluates the project's implementation, challenges and outcomes to discuss the potential for enhancing capacity skills. Okay, I'll summarize in few lines only very soon. So when we talk about the three major areas, so we have to emphasize just the impact, its challenges and its future prospects also. So when we talk about this project, right now we cannot discuss in detail, but we can focus majorly on various areas where government has initiated, like the digital education, where right now we are like having very less time. So I have some details about the statistical details, but just to wind up this session, we can say that when we talk about the future prospects, we can say that EVAC project is not only a development initiative, but also strategic engagement to enhance India's diplomatic relationship. And it also works in the health sector, where providing various vaccines and various health support to the African countries. Not only this, by providing the online digital education through the innovative technologies and ideas, so that African students can also avail the same resources and services. So this is not only a relationship of the educational or the health relationship, but it is a relationship or a bond which is going beyond this these sectors, and it is promoting the value and a good relationship, diplomatic, political, economic, and of course the strong bond which we can find through this conference as well. So I just want to wind up and thank you everyone for providing me this opportunity to present my paper, and thank you for the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Our last speaker for the session, Dr. Vineet Sharma. Yes, sorry, Dr. Saroj Mahananda, please.
Thank you, sir. In fact, I must apologize for the late appearance here. Because of the topic and the classes there, I could not make it on time. Anyway, without much ado, respected chair,
You can bring the mic closer.
and observers of fans, organizers, University of Delhi, Dr. Vijay Stamina, and esteemed co-panelists, my dear friends, and the audience, of course, yes. The topic of my presentation
site for shared history, culture, and language. In fact, I had the bad luck of not being privy to many of my people at the state, and there are quite a few practical programs that might have been already released. What I am going to say is about literature, how literature can work as a kind of bridging the gap, or doing the work of bridging the gap. So before I go to the literature, history, culture, and the language part, maybe a quick touch upon what it means to be literature and what is the term called this Girmetia literature. Because one of the main themes of this conference is that Girmetia. So Girmetia literature. What do we mean by Girmetia? Who are the Girmetias? And what is Girmetia literature? So we know that in 19th century there was this agreement, an agreement between the colonial rulers and the laborers, Indian laborers. And the Indian laborers from mostly UP, Bihar, and who had the agreement, and as the function was to, purpose was to have indentured labor. The word agreement, which could not be or maybe what we say something which gets corrupted in the usage. Agreement gets corrupted into Girmetia. So from agreement, because they had the agreement to go there, and since the word cannot be said by the folks, by the illiterate people who were the laborers, so that's how that word gets coined as Girmetia. The people who went there as indentured labor in different parts of the country, Fiji, Suriname, Mauritius, and all these places, they were known as Girmetias. So there is this identity of the labor. The word Girmetia would actually evoke the identity of the laborer as someone who was taken from this place and to a different land. In today's terminology, we would have something called diaspora. Diaspora is dispersed. Dispersed, someone who has been dispersed from the homeland. So what happens to the Girmetias? The Girmetias went there, and in the process of going, what did they go through? And whatever they did go through, that was recorded in their songs, in their local stories, and through oral literature. So that becomes the site, and that becomes the site of literature, that becomes the site of oral literature, orature. So that's where I am going to take you. So any literature for that matter is in some way a kind of site for kind of consciousness, some kind of awareness, some kind of identity, and some kind of sensibility. And what kind of sensibility these Girmetias develop in the process of, in the course of their movement from India, Kolkata port to Pravasi Ghat. So this would be the contention, the process of the dialogue that can talk about their process and how the history can be revisited and how the recorded history and their shared history can be used by both countries, and not just only by the country which is there, or all the neighboring countries, in order to further our exchanges, current exchanges, cultural exchanges, so that we further our relations better. So in that process, I would touch upon briefly about history. History is something, for example, we know that the first, and I will take up the Fiji as an example, and because there are other things, and then one can do the brief span of this single presentation, one cannot cover all the people. So I will take up one country, and the people from Girmetias from one country, that is Fiji, and that I try to develop how the culture, and they can tell us many things about our relations. The first arrival of Indians in Fiji has a very long story. The first group of Indian indentured laborers arrived in Fiji on May 14, 1879, when the ship Lavaridas arrived carrying them to work in the colonial sugarcane fields in the British colonial period. Over the next 4 decades, approximately 61,000 Indians from Bhojpuri belt of Uttar Pradesh and Bihar were taken to work in Fiji's sugarcane fields until 1960, when Indian citizenship was suspended and finally abolished in 1920 due to the shortcomings of the Indian government. So, in and around this, the vast literature has been written on the history of the so-called indentured labor and the deception and abuse meted out to the indentured or bonded laborers of men, women and children during their long journeys by the colonial industry. But much has been written over the past decades. British educated people wrote, Western people wrote, except for the pioneer works of Pandit Todaram Sarat. Most of the Hindi authors wrote in English language, and Pandit Todaram wrote about this experience on his return to India from Fiji in 1914, and the visual productions of English was there. So when you have Indian writers or writers working in this area, they have recorded their plight. So when they record their plight, what happens? Okay. So, and in which language did they write? They wrote Hindi, that is Bhojpuri. So normally when someone talks about Hindi, we have standardized version of Hindi, but Bhojpuri is one of the prominent strand of Hindi. So it is written, the writings that are written in Bhojpuri is the subject matter of my kind of presentation today. So Hindi and Bhojpuri, I would use them simultaneously, synonymously. So that's it turns out to the side of the carrier of this culture, folk, and the idea that they have. For this, I would take up I'm sorry. I had 3 poems or 3 songs in mind, but I will speak about and touch upon one single poem. In fact, when one traces the trajectory of these narratives, one can have one narrative, for example, as someone's separation, Virah, people going from this place and reaching there, Virah. Then in the process they have their engagements with the place, new place, and then third, that is engagement with the new place, the second stage, and the third stage is the reconciliation to the new place. So that's how 3 stages one can see in these folk traditions. And because one of the areas that I developed is folk. So the third one I would speak of how reconciliation has taken place. One of the beautiful, finest songs that is available online, and then the video that is available online. I will request the organizers, can you have that video please? I had downloaded that, and just briefly. No, it's not available, no problem. Okay. If you can play that just quickly. It's a very poignant tale of the reconciliation, and it's a wonderful one. I think one should miss that. That's why I requested it. Just quickly, please. If you can, if you don't have it, I will. Okay. Thank you. This is titled as Fiji Videsia, and it had been it was sung by Rantu Singh in 2010, and it was written by late master Sant Prasad Bahadur Torkode, India's school lecturer who grew up in Fiji Island, 1961. So this one, I would request you people to please watch. Maybe you can. Okay. Maybe I will just kind of read out the lyric little bit and then explain it. And so this is about Kaun Nagariya Main Tohra Kasirwa. Which place do you belong to? Or you come from? Hamri Gayal Kab Aave Re Badriya. When will you come to my house? Kujia ke Tapwa Rupiya Rupiya. Once we have it, it will be wonderful because when you just read a poem, that is actually doing violence to the poem. So I shouldn't care that. Once we have that, that will be wonderful. Yeah. So, maybe you can forward that a little bit. We don't have to wait. So here again, these two lines that were there, which place do you stay, when will you come to my house? And Fujiya ke Tapua, Rupia hi Rupia. There are a lot of money here. But then, paisa is not everything. Something is being remembered. You see? Baithale Jahanwa mein isma Videsiya, we have become Videsiya. And Jahaz, because this is the address to the Jahazi Bhai. So because they had come to the Jahaz and Jahazi Bhai. So, Deen Mahina Paniya, Deen and full, day and night and months. So, water and water. Because it's about Fiji ka tapu, Fiji ke tapua. So that's how that was explained. It's a wonderful song. Maybe some other time you people can just have a listening. And because the time is not permitting, I would have to stop here. But the final word that one has to say about this is literature, song and folk songs and dance and music can be the connecting factor. And if we, in the process of our connection with these lands and these places, people can go back to those things, but we will definitely have a chance to share our memory, history, identity, and culture. And that will be the important factor. Thank you so much. Thank you.
We have just had a very enlightening and interesting session. I know if the speaker had not to talk about the subject, but due to paucity of time, they had to be restricted. Otherwise, we would have carried out the night today. Now, one thing, under the trying circumstances and ill treatment of our people who had gone to various African countries, and India, they had to endure that. Not only they endured that, but they contributed their might and efforts in developing those countries. Today, the testimony of that is Mauritius. There you find the development which has been undertaken in that particular area, where about 70% population is Indian. Our Prime Minister was from India, and so is our ambassador from India, who is here today. Salute you. Despite all these things, they have maintained their culture and traditions. The last word which I wanted to mention today, we have we need today to develop more close cooperation with these countries for one simple reason, that China is spreading its wings under the initiative of digital economy, and they are offering big money to these countries for the development. We have seen what happened in Sri Lanka, in Hambantota, and another in Pakistan, Border, and other countries as well. They have been offering interest-free, not interest-free, but very low interest, high kind of amount capital investment. And then the countries can't pay that. They take away that particular area and control that. We have seen that various ships are now docking in Sri Lanka and Hambantota, and Pakistan, Vadar, of course, is now a very crucial port where these people are there. Therefore, we have to be very cautious about these things. We missed our kind of initiative in Sri Lanka, and that's how all that happened. So just with these words, I have finished my concluding remarks. Thank you very much, panelists, and thank you, audience.
Thank you so much, sir, for your gracious chairing and, of course, enlightening us with your nice words. Now, I would like to request Dr. Kritika to take command for the next academic session, which will be followed from just now.
A very warm welcome to our distinguished dignitaries, respected members and presenters for today's second academic session. I would like to call upon stage Professor Aslam Khan, Professor Naveen Jamal, and Dr. Mulita Hussain Sidero, with a chair, Professor A.B. Shukla sir, IH retired, IJNCA. Please kindly give us 5 minutes so that we can just set up the stage and start the presentations. a very warm welcome to all our distinguished dignitaries, respected members and presenters for the second academic session for the 4th HHRS International Conference on the theme Historical Connectivity between India, Africa and Eritrea. This second academic session will be chaired by Honorable Professor A.B. Shuklasa, IAS retired, IGNCA, Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for chairing this session. Your leadership and active role of your delegation for this theme is imperative. The presenters for this session includes Professor Aslam Khan. He is the Associate Professor in Department of Gandhian and Peace Studies, Mahatma Gandhi Central University, Bihar. Prior to this, he served as a Professor of International Relations and Dean, Faculty of Social and Management Sciences, Yobe State University, Nigeria. The second presenter for today is Professor Naved Jamal. Presently, he is Associate Professor, Department of Political Science, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. He is also awarded ICSSR FMSH Indo-France Visitorship in France starting June 2014 for a month in the name of Indo-French Program of Cooperation in Social Sciences for carrying out research work. The third presenter being Dr. Satyendra Pritham, who will be joining us online from Mauritius. He is the former acting head of the technical unit, a historian responsible for the documentation unit, who is permanently based in the research unit of the Pravasi Car Trust Fund. He is a member of the International Scientific Committee of the Secretariat of the Indentured Labour Route and coordinator of the IRRPS Indian Ocean Regional Committee. He is also the member of the University of Nantes Indentured Labour History Project, the Lawyers Union Indentured Labour Scientific Committee, and a fellow of Labour Project at the University of Lisbon. Our fourth presenter for today is Dr. Muleta Sedito from Ethiopia. He is the Lecture and Public Relations Directorate, Director of Manavalapu University, Communication and International Relations Directorate, Director of Romania State University, and Vice President of International Partnerships Office, Head of Romania State University, and Social and Development Issues Advisor to Romania Regional State President. He is also the Vice Chancellor. Thank you for being the presenters for today. I give a very warm welcome to all our presenters and our Honorable Chair, sir. We should now commence the program with a felicitation ceremony. May I please request Sudhanshu to felicitate our distinguished Professor A.B. Shuklaji. May I now request Dr. Inderpreet ma'am to felicitate Professor Aslam Khan. I would now request Ms. Ishita to felicitate Professor Naved Jamal. A huge round of applause, please. May I now request to call Mr. Anand to felicitate Dr. Muleta Hussain Sidito from Ethiopia. Without further ado, let's start the presentation first with our presenter, Professor Aslam Khan. Sir, the stage is all yours.
Professor David Sir, my fellow panelists, Honorable Chair, Professor Naveed Jamal, and other dignitaries. It is my proud privilege to present here in this fourth SSRS conference. On that matter, I am highly grateful to my childhood friend, Professor Mehtab Alam Rizvi, who gave me the opportunity to interact and meet here with my seniors, friends. I can name Professor Madar Asif sir is here, RN Singh sir is here, and my salute to all military veterans who serve our country and the fellow students, audience is here. I am highly thankful to meet you here and thank you for giving me this opportunity. So today I am going to speak on Indian diaspora as an agent of socio-cultural bond between India and Ethiopia. Why I chose this topic? Because I have served in Ethiopia for more than 3.5 years, and I am having first-hand experience that how Indian culture or Indian cultural diplomacy is playing a part in African continent, especially in Ethiopia. As in my introduction, it was told that I also served in Nigeria in different capacities. So I am having the experiences of East and West Africa with me, that how Indian culture and Indian traditions or Indian soft power is playing a very important role in shaping the relations in the 21st century. So when we talk of India-Africa relations, that we are having a lot of old legacies of cultural connects. And the impact of Indian culture is evident in African continent in terms of music, dance, Bollywood. Of course, when I first landed in Nigeria, then people they used to ask me that, are you the brother of Salman Khan? Then I said, no, I am not. So this kind of identity the Indian Bollywood actors or the old Bollywood actors they have in Africa. And the Indian dance, Indian dresses, it is a reality that the people love to have them. So the African aspirations and this, India's independence or African independence, they are having much similarities. And in the old struggle for the freedom, because both have been the victim of the British colonialism, India and Africa, though some of the African countries, they are Francophone, they were the French colony, but the part where I was, like Ghana, Nigeria, they were Anglophone countries, they were under the British domination before. So in this paper, I used cultural diplomacy theory, because when we talk of cultural diplomacy, it's a type of public diplomacy and kind of soft power that includes the exchange of ideas, information, art, language, and their people in order to foster mutual understanding. And the purpose of cultural diplomacy is for the people of a foreign nation to develop an understanding of the nation's ideals and institutions in an effort to build broad support for economic and political objectives. So in this cultural diplomacy, in the public diplomacy, there is theory of the soft power, because when we talk of international order, in international orders we talk of liberalism, because liberalism is founded on the basis of that if democracies are there, there will be no war. Because after Second World, everybody wanted to have a kind of world order where we can escape from the deadly wars. So liberalism played an important role in terms of that. And their main argument is that if we are going to have, like Michael Cohen is there, for that matter, Immanuel Kant is there, theory of persuasion peace. So they came up with the idea that more and more democracies will be there, because in democracies we are having a chance if our rulers, they are more war-prone or they are having more ambitions, then they can change them, or democracies don't fight with each other. Then second one is cooperation, because more institutional cooperation or people-to-people cooperation will be there. Then, and the third one that comes to the new liberalism, that Joseph Lee and others, they came up with the idea of complex interdependence. So in the era of complex interdependence, of this political construct that we see the Indo-African relations or Indo-Ethiopia relations, then we see the lot of cooperation and cooperative framework we have seen. And if I go back to the Indian diaspora, to Ethiopia or other part of Africa, it has left a deep impact in the socio-economic development. Especially I am taking the case of Ethiopia, And the India-Ethiopian linkages we can trace in the history as trade movements during the Aksumite Empire, when it was between 100 and 940 AD, is a pointer to the deeper ties, that how deep our ties in the ancient era. And in the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia is a major country in terms of trading route in the Horn. So the trade has been the medium of cultural exchange between India and Ethiopia in the earlier times. Later, the considerable presence of Indian community in Ethiopia in the field of education, in the field of trade, commerce, that contributed to a great cultural connect. And these are numerous examples we can find the expansion of yoga at the international level and the celebration of International Day of Yoga in the capital of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, and Indian participant in Ethiopian films. These are the few examples that how we are connected with each other. And if we go by the history during the British period, then in 1868, General Robert Napier led a punitive expedition to obtain the release of European diplomats and missionaries who had been imprisoned by the Emperor Theodore II in Ethiopia, and these 30,000 forces that were including 13,000 soldiers from India, and mostly they were from the Sikh community. And later the British army, and in 1936 that ended the Italian occupation of Ethiopia. India played a very important role in that process. And India initiated diplomatic relations soon after Ethiopian independence by Sardar San Singh as the head of the delegation in 1948. And India resumed the full diplomatic ties in 1950 under the first ambassador Sardar San Singh. And when we talk of Indian community, the earliest settler among the Indian community in Ethiopia came from the Gujarat. And in the later year of the 19th century and during imperial times, there were also tens of thousands of Indian teachers in the schools all over the Ethiopia, even the most remote parts of Ethiopia. And the movement of the Indian community in Africa, or in, especially East Africa, that has been traditionally and closely between successive Ethiopian regimes. It was a very friendly relationship. When the communist regime in Ethiopia came up, then the relationship somehow stagnated. But after that, the relationship continued. And in the present time, if I go back to the history, then William Dalrymple, in his upcoming book, The Golden Route, he talks about the Red Sea, this corridor, that how important it was in the ancient time. And during the recent G20 summit, the same route was discussed, that how we can connect with the Europe through that particular route. So, a lot of the things from the ancient times that are having very much relevance, and this relevance can be identified in the actions of our policies of the government in the present time, that we gave more emphasis, more priorities to Africa, and a key example that we can take here, that in the G20, the inclusion of the African Union by the efforts of our dynamic Prime Minister PM Modi. So it is another feather in the camp of India, that how deep we are thinking, because we are the civilization, because our country's existence depends on a political culture, a kind of the civic culture that is liberal, that is representative, that is having the values and ethos that can be transferred to the another continent, to another people. So India is very much lucky in this regard, that we have produced the leaders like Gandhi, Nehru, Vivekananda. So we are having a rich legacy of peace, Buddhism, of course. So these kind of the things that we are, how these things that transfer to the other people, other nations, and how we are culturally connected with these nations. So in this regard, so Indian legacy or Indian culture is very much welcome, not only in Africa but all part of the world. If we see the Ethiopian fooding culture, if we see the traditional Ethiopian dresses, these are very much similar to our Indian dresses, or the people, they are very much like those kind of the songs, those kind of the dresses, those kind of the culture, and a very important part Indians are playing in the field of education, in the field of technology, and the other developmental project. And one thing I should mention here, that India is very much lucky to gain the trust of these nations, because when I went to Ethiopia, and I see a lot of the roads and other kind of the development projects are being taken by China, but
the people and the lot of the goods, like in terms of technology or the like transportation, that were transported from China. But when I was traveling with this three-wheeler, we call it Bajaj there. So the Indian things or Indian products are very reliable if we compare it to the China. So we are having a very good reputation in terms of honesty, in terms of the products. So China is not having this kind of the edge, though they are very much advanced in Africa. They are very much ahead with us, but the trust is very important in that we are really, in any relationship, trust is the foundation. So we are very lucky to have that. And another thing that I have noticed that whole education sector of Ethiopia, higher education of course, Indians are playing a very important role and Indian teachers are very well respected. Even when I was in Nigeria, then I realized that even at the primary school levels or the middle school levels, in 60s and 70s, Indian teachers were there and Indian teachers are well regarded there. Or Indian citizens are well regarded over there. So we are having a rich historical and cultural legacy with Ethiopia because a lot of the things have been said about India-Africa relations, so I am not going to deep into it. But India-Ethiopia relations are still updating the historical, cultural and trade things by involving all the aspects of the closer ties. The considerable presence of Indians in innovation, technology, culture and economy is cementing the bonds. And present government did a remarkable job in strengthening the relationship with African countries. And I hope that this relationship or this cultural connect will contribute into a greater say when we are talking of United Nations for permanent member in the Security Council or any other aspect that we didn't expect anything from any country, but when we are doing good with the others, then we can expect that anything we are doing good in return, we are going at least good from those particular countries, and this cementing ties will contribute India's stature at a global level. So with these words, I am stopping here. Thank you very much for patient listening. I would love to have discussion on it. Thank you very much.
Very well done, Professor Khan. And I think the people are not wrong if they mistake of Salman Khan. But your presentation was not your same. Please.
Thank you, Professor Aslam, for your insightful conclusions. I may please request Professor Naved Jamal Sir, Department of Political Science, Jamia Millia Islamia, to present his paper today.
Delegates on the dais and off the dais. At the outset, I want to thank fans because this is a great achievement, friends, that we are here. Jawaharlal Nehru University successful event. France has taken a leap and we are really discussing it because of these issues that the world is grappling in the newfound globalization. हम तो घमंडीकृत थे और रहेंगे और आगे भी चलते रहेंगे. जब से हमारी सभ्यता थी हम विश्वीकृत और घमंडीकृत थे. ये तो अमेरिका अब बोल रहा है 91 के बाद ये घमंडीकरण आ गया है. हम एक हो गए, इंटरनेट एक्सप्लोरर आ गया, दुनिया समानांतर हो गई है. लेकिन इंडिया और अफ्रीका की जब हम चर्चा करते हैं तो हमारा सिविलाइजेशन और कॉन्टिनेंटल, जब स्वामी जी बात कर रहे थे शिकागो में तो ये बोल रहे थे कि कॉन्फ्लुएंस ये सभ्यता का कैसे उभर रहा है. और उसी संदर्भ में मैं अपनी बात रखूंगा कि किस प्रकार ये जो हमारा जो कॉन्टिनेंट है, अभी चाइना कह रहा है हमारे लॉस्ट ब्रदर है. अरे भाई ये लॉस्ट तुम्हारे होंगे, ये तो हमारे हैं और रहेंगे. हम इनका साथ था और होगा और रहेगा. And in this perspective, I want to place in the August gathering of our military ex-armaments and also our senior bureaucrats and our scholars and young budding scholars at the back, but they are not at the back. ये युवाओं का देश है और आप ही को आगे अग्रणी होना है और हमारी बात को आगे लेके चलना है कि किस प्रकार इस संदर्भ में जहां हम ग्रुप ऑफ 77 जहां हम मैन की चर्चा करते हैं और आज जब G20 में हमने अफ्रीका का प्रतिनिधित्व बहुत समूचे रूप से रखा, उसी संदर्भ में देखना होगा कि भारत हर हमेशा अग्रणी रहा. हमारी लड़ाई स्वतंत्रता की हमारी अपनी लड़ाई नहीं थी। ये सिर्फ एशिया के राष्ट्रों की लड़ाई नहीं थी। अल्जीरिया, टूनिसिया, ये सब मुस्लिम बहुल राष्ट्र है, लेकिन हमने उनकी भी लड़ाई लड़ी। क्यों? क्योंकि ये कॉलोनाइजेशन के अगेंस्ट थे। और ये सारा जो हिमालय हिंद महासागर राष्ट्र समूह है जो चर्चा का विषय है, इसी संदर्भ में मैं अपनी बात रखूंगा कि किस प्रकार भारत जो लोकतांत्रिक मूल्यों से अपनी संस्कृति सभ्यता को संजोता रहा है और आगे जो जरूरत है विश्व पटल पे जहां संघर्ष चल रहे हैं वहां शांति की आवश्यकता है, और उसी शांति में भारत हर हमेशा आगे रहा, चाहे वो आर्थिक स्तर हो, चाहे वो सामाजिक स्तर हो, चाहे वो आज का उभरता हुआ IT हो, उस सारे संदर्भ में इसकी प्रासंगिकता इतिहास से लेते हुए आज जब हम ट्रेड और इन्वेस्टमेंट की बात करते हैं तो वो बहुत अभूतपूर्व है। दूसरा जो सबसे मुख्य चर्चा है उसको हमें दोबारा लाना होगा, वो है एग्रीकल्चर। गोरे जब यहाँ आए तो हम ऑलरेडी कैश क्रॉप की बुआई करते थे, तो उन्होंने इंडिगो हम पे थोपा, हमने लड़ाई लड़ी, और ये अफ्रीका में भी ऐसे ही हुआ क्योंकि ये बहुत कैलकुलेटेड थे। इन्होंने कहा क्यों मुस्लिम का डेका क्लॉथ जहाँ पॉपुलर है, क्यों अफ्रीका में भारत आगे बढ़ रहा है, और हमारी क्योंकि साझा विरासत थी, और उसी साझा विरासत के संदर्भ में हमने ये देखा कि किस तरीके से आज जब भारत अफ्रीका एक साथ आ रहे हैं नेशनल फोरम में, वहाँ हमें एक नया संरचना देखने को मिल रही है, जहाँ हमने 16 नई एम्बेसियां अफ्रीका में खोली हैं, क्योंकि हमें लगता है कि बहुत जरूरत है। अब भारत को आगे बढ़ना ही होगा, हमें किसी और की तरफ नहीं देखना। यह हमारी कल्पना नहीं है, ये हमें इसको पूरा करना है कि किस तरीके से जो नींव हमने रखी थी, जो हमारे भारत के कितने महापुरुषों ने जो योगदान दिया है, आज उसकी पूर्ति करनी है। और अभी हमने वो देखा कि प्राइम मिनिस्टर नरेंद्र मोदी ने जो पावर प्रोजेक्ट सूडान हो, बुरुंडी हो, रवांडा हो, और रवांडा में भी ये लड़ाई लड़ा रहे हैं। सोमालिया में जनरल फराही को खड़ा कर देते हैं, हुटी से तुत्सी को मरवा देते हैं। तो हम तो भैया शांति की बात कर रहे हैं, चाहे हमारी शांति सेना हो, चाहे हमारी शांति स्थापना के प्रयास हो, चाहे हमारे जो एग्रीकल्चर के क्षेत्र में शुगर प्लांट की स्थापना हुई इथियोपिया में या मलावी में, या अभी जो बहुत जरूरत है, जैसे आपने देखा टेक्नोलॉजी की, तो मोजाम्बिक, अभी जब प्रधानमंत्री मोदी गए मोजाम्बिक, तो अब वो क्या है कि हम लोग अकेले नहीं चल रहे राजनेता, हम बिजनेस के नेताओं को भी साथ लेके चल रहे हैं कि भैया विकास तो आप लोगों को भी करना है ना, क्योंकि ये पूंजी आपकी पूंजी नहीं है, ये राष्ट्र की पूंजी है, और इसका निवेश हम आगे कैसे विस्तार करें कि लोगों के हित में, समाज के हित में, समूचे विश्व के हित में एक योगदान भारत दे सकता है। और उसी संदर्भ में चाहे वो विश्वविद्यालयों की स्थापना हो तांजानिया में, उगांडा में, चाहे हम देखें कि किस तरीके से हमने कल्पना जो विश्व पटल पे रखी, अफ्रीका की पहली इंडिया अफ्रीका समिट हुई, भारत में पहली एशिया पैसिफिक आइलैंड समिट हुई, यानी अभी तक हमने आइलैंड समिट्स को छोड़ दिया था, मतलब ये हमारे लिए महत्वपूर्ण नहीं है। तो ये बहुत अभूतपूर्व योगदान है जो सरकारें जब सजग होती हैं, सरकारें जब आगे की सोचती हैं, तब हम बात करते हैं पीस कीपिंग की, जहाँ 4400 पीस कीपिंग जिसमें महिलाएं की भी भागीदारी है, वो शांति के लिए प्रेरणा के स्रोत हैं पूरे विश्व में। कोविड के संदर्भ में माननीय अंग्रेज जी ने बात रखी कि किस तरीके से भारत ने कोई मूल्य नहीं दिया, मूल्य तो हमारी संस्कृति का जो हम दे रहे हैं कि भाई हमें किसी से पैसा नहीं चाहिए, पैसा तो हाथ की मेल है, अभी आएगा चला जाएगा। और उसी संदर्भ में हमने पैसे को साइड में रखे, अपने मूल्यों को, जो भारत की संस्कृति है, जो हमारी सभ्यता है, उसी संदर्भ में हमने विश्व पटल पे, जहाँ एक तरफ चाइना से, वुहान से वायरस निकल रहा था, तो हमने उसकी रोकथाम के लिए प्रयास करे, चाहे वो एशिया हो, चाहे वो अफ्रीका हो, चाहे वो खाड़ी हो, कोई भी विश्व का देश हमारे समक्ष है, हमने उसके लिए बढ़ चढ़ के योगदान दिया। और इसी संदर्भ में जब हम देखते हैं इंडिया अफ्रीका फोरम समिट को जो 2015 से चल रही, उसमें भी हमने देखा कि भारत एक अग्रणी आगे बढ़ रहा है, जहाँ बिजनेस मैन्युफैक्चरिंग डेलीगेशंस के संदर्भ में हम लोग अपनी प्रयास कर रहे हैं, जहाँ मेक इन इंडिया और जो स्टार्टअप इंडिया के जो हमने एजेंडा रखा है, उसमें चाहे ऑटोमोबाइल सेक्टर हो, इलेक्ट्रॉनिक हो, चाहे फूड प्रोसेसिंग हो, बायोटेक्नोलॉजी हो, डिफेंस हो, मीडिया हो, या फिर एंटरटेनमेंट। अभी आप देखते हैं एंटरटेनमेंट में आमिर खान, सलमान खान, ये सब जितने भी हमारे स्टार हैं, राज कपूर से जो कहानी शुरू हुई थी वो अभी तक चल रही है और ये चलती रहेगी, क्योंकि भारत दिल में बसता है। भारत मन में बसता है और यही इस मुख्य संदर्भ है इस व्याख्यान का कि मैं चाहता हूं कि आप लोग समझें कि आज जब मैरीटाइम डोमेन के संदर्भ में हम बात कर रहे हैं, जहां ब्लू और ग्रीन इकोनॉमीज की बात कर रहे हैं, तो वहां भारत एक अच्छा योगदान दे रहा है और उसमें मुझे लगता है कि कंबाइंड एक्सक्लूसिव मैरीटाइम जोन जो आज की कल्पना है, जहां लैंड ऑफ स्टेट्स हैं, जहां पैसिफिक आइलैंड्स हैं, वहां भारत एक अच्छा योगदान दे रहा है। और उसी संदर्भ में आप देखेंगे कि जो बिजनेस है, पहला हमारी फिक्की थी, फिर हमारा एसोचैम आया, तो उसके बाद जब हमने देखा कि CII को डेवलप किया हमने, कॉन्फेडरेशन ऑफ इंडियन इंडस्ट्रीज, और आज सारे चाहे वो FIE हो, CII हो, चाहे PIGCCI हो, सभी का ये योगदान है कि किस तरीके से हम इन प्रोजेक्ट का निर्वहन करें और इनको अंतिम चरण तक पहुंचाएं। और उसी संदर्भ में 5 क्षेत्र हैं जहां भारत अग्रणी योगदान दे सकता है। पहला है डिजिटल, दूसरा है ग्रीन इकोनॉमी, ग्रीन क्योंकि अभी क्लाइमेट चेंज की चर्चा पूरे विश्व पटल पे चल रही है। भारत तो एक ऐसा राष्ट्र है जहां हम प्रकृति की पूजा करते हैं। भैया ये कैसा हो सकता है कि हम इसके साथ अनर्थ होने दें? तो जो प्रकृति है उसका भी नियम है सृष्टि का परिवर्तन। तो आज भारत एक परिवर्तन की स्थिति में, जहां हेल्थ का क्षेत्र हो, हमें लोगों तक अपनी दवाइयां पहुंचाने और भारत कर रहा है कि सस्ते दरों पे दवाइयां दे रहे हैं, चाहे वो बड़ी बड़ी कंपनियां, उन सब रेमडेसिविर, उन सबसे वार्ता चल रही है, चाहे वो फूड के स्तर पे हम खुद भोजन का संरक्षण और दूसरों के लिए भी हमें पहुंचाना है भोजन। आपको मैं एक एग्जांपल इथियोपिया का दूंगा कि इथियोपिया में चाइना ने इतनी बड़ी इंडस्ट्री लगाई है फुटवेयर की कि उसमें उन्होंने मैटरनिटी का पूरा अगर यूनिट बना दिया कि ये जो आ रही महिलाएं, इनकी हम जैसे सरप्लस वैल्यू में छीन रहे हैं इनकी, इसके अलावा इनको थोड़ा बहुत जो इनके बच्चे हैं उनको लालन पालन करते ताकि ये लोग खुश हो जाए। मतलब see the audacity of these Chinese that they are exploiting the the innocence of the child also, that how they can earn money. And the last thing is water. अगला युद्ध जो है पानी पे है और हमें इसी संदर्भ में पानी को बचाना भी है और आगे लोगों तक पहुंचाना है। अंत में मैं यही कहूंगा कि इंडिया और अफ्रीका एक पैराडाइम शिफ्ट के संदर्भ में मैं देखता हूं जहां ग्लोबल पटल पे आर्थिक व्यवस्था में इसकी एक नई गतिमयता है और उस गतिमयता को हमें कोलैबोरेटिव स्टेज पे ले जाना है। इसके चुनौतियों को हम सबको साझा लेके आगे चलना है और हम सबका इंटरकनेक्टेड फ्यूचर है, हम इनसे अलग नहीं है, ये हमारे ही हैं। सो विद दिस वर्ड आपने मेरी बात सुनी और मैं अपनी वाणी को विराम देता हूँ। आप सबका धन्यवाद। जय हिंद, जय भारत।
And you have beautifully summed up India's contribution, and that might be copied from Mashhad Afridi कि जमीन पर घर बनाया है मगर जन्नत में रहते हैं, जमीन पर घर बनाया है मगर जन्नत में रहते हैं। हम सब नसीब हैं कि भारत में रहते हैं।
Thank you, Professor Naved, for an insightful session. I would now like to call upon the podium Dr. Muleta Hussain Sidito to present his paper.
नमस्ते। इंडिया अफ्रीका के अंदर राष्ट्रीय सम्मेलन में आपका स्वागत है। Thank you so much. First of all, before starting my speech, I would like to thank the conference organizer. Especially, my special thanks goes to my lovely professor, well-known Indian professor, here, Professor Madhav Alam. Thank you so much. We organized a very beautiful and precise conference on Africa and India relations. So I will present my paper on India-Africa trade and investment relations in short. India is an emerging as an important country due to its global economic and political relations with the world. India's strong historical relation with African economy that makes it as an important partner for the region. India is the lead by trade and investment in Africa. Congratulations. So, the increasing two-way visit by leaders, officials, academics, from both reflects the enthusiasm of the relationship, especially trade and investment relation between two countries, that is between India and Ethiopia specifically, and India and Africa continent are increasing from time to time. Especially the trade and investment relation between two countries make both nations closer and develop good understanding among two continents. India and Africa has a rich history of interaction from ancient civilization, and it often repeated the historical importances among its ties with Africa, continent, and Ethiopia as a country. As a former Prime Minister, Manmohan Singh stated, India will never forget Africa's role in inspiring our own struggle for national liberation. It was here that Mahatma Gandhi developed his political philosophy, developing the concept of non-violence and peaceful resistance among African countries. The idea of shared historical experience marked by Western exploitation is an important factor in enhancing relationship between Africa and India. India, as a previous British colony, shared a history of anti-colonial struggle with Africa. Under the banner of South-South cooperation, India worked with growth and development initiatives with Africa. But trade and investment relations between both economies were not strong enough during the period of 1970. Indian economy opened its door for bilateral relations during 1990s when economic reforms were announced. It has strong economic relations with all the trading blocs and geographical regions of the world, which includes like ASEAN, SAARC, BIMSTEC, and Africa. By this opportunity, again it was the India's role. Ethiopia, my country, Ethiopia became the member of BRICS and participated in the G20 summit here in New Delhi. So, and India reduced its trade regulation that made easy trading between the economy, led the development of Indian economic relations with other nations. If we talk about trade viewpoint, India has emerged as the largest trading partner of Africa, especially in Africa from both rural and urban towns. You may know the Three Lakes Cup as Professor Aslam Bajaj. Bajaj is serving as indirect ambassador of India in Africa. Wherever you go, you can see Bajaj. All people are saying Bajaj, Bajaj. Like that. This is the growth of Indian products in Africa. The other is when we see India-Africa investment relation there, India started investment in Africa when Birla was invested in Ethiopia in 1956. The group also entered into a joint venture with the Kenyan government and the World Bank. Moreover, investment during the period was very small, made by handful of large Indian firms that were also considerably smaller in size as compared to current growth. India's economic interest in Africa has undergone a qualitative shift in the recent past, and that is reflected in intensified direct investment, trade, aid, and other programs, including education sectors. Through close cooperation with the Confederation of Indian Industry and the Export-Import Bank of India, the government has been taking several initiatives through the India-Africa Conclave and other mechanisms to encourage both public and private sector companies to get involved in Africa. And to conclude my presentation, trade and investment relations between two countries make both nations closer and provide a platform for the use of available resources, which strengthens both countries. India's exports to African region is showing an increasing trend over the period of study. It's the good and largest market in East Africa for its goods, and those countries import the highest amount from India, which contributes 29% share of total export to Africa continent, as of 2027 report. Around 34% of India's export to Africa went to West African countries, which chiefly comprises electrical materials, pharmaceutical products, and baking, including Bajaj. India has the biggest market in Nigeria also, as mentioned earlier, as it is the largest economy of the region. India also imports around 45% from West Africa, whereas the South African Customs Union exports 25% out of total Indian import from Africa as of 2017 report. The main items exported by this region are mineral fuels, oils, and products of the distillation, mineral wax, alcohol food, aluminium, and edible food and nuts. The South African National Union economy exports highest GDP import from Africa during the year 2017. This country is exporting mineral fuel, oil, and products of the distillation, mineral wax, alcohol food, and etc. It would be fit to state that India and Africa also have a strong investment relationship, like FDI growth. Mauritius is showing an increased trend over the period, and it supports the first position in FDI growth in India. As a recommendation, there is clearly strong interest from the Indian private sector in driving trade and investment relations with Africa, particularly given the increasing level of trade and investment between the two. The Indian government also has an active economic diplomacy policy that has seen as a member of joint activity pursued by government and business, including the sideline of the IAFS. It is interesting to note that this proactive stance has not been matched by the same level of engagement from African partners. For example, including challenging the establishment of the India-Africa Business Council, this could be explained by lack of involvement on the part of the African private sector for initiative coordinated nationally or regionally, such as at the African Union level. By this opportunity, currently I'm serving as Peace Ambassador at African Union. We are encouraging how we intense African-India relations more than this. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dr. Muleta. You have very beautifully highlighted the India-Africa relationship. I'm grateful for that. And how beautifully you told us the history shared by both the countries, but rather both continents. We both suffered the colonial oppression and how the trade is going on. Great, very beautiful, and very few words. You highlighted all the issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Muleta, for an intriguing and a thought-provoking session. Now I would like to introduce to you Dr. Beryl Anand, Assistant Professor, Center for Gandhian Thought and Peace Studies, School of Social Sciences, Central University of Gujarat, and she'll be joining with us online. Ma'am, I hope you can hear
indentured labor in colonial India. So, who are the indentured laborers? This is a question that arises as to who are these indentured laborers. So, the entire system was enacted, was brought into force by the British after Britain started, after the abolition, after the complete abolition of slavery in all of the British colonies, that is in the year 1833. How did the abolition of slavery start? Britain enacted a law to ban the transatlantic slave trade in 1807. Although full abolition of slavery did not follow for another generation, the transatlantic slave trade reaches its peak by 1787, when the Society for the Abolition of the Slave Trade that was founded in Britain by Granville Sharp and Thomas Luxon, they take up this fight. After the Abolition of Slavery Act, Britain orders the complete abolition, gradual abolition of slavery in all of the British colonies. Plantation owners in the West Indies received 20 million pounds in compensation, owing to the demand for laborers. How did Gandhi, M.K. Gandhi, come in close contact with the indentured laborers in South Africa? Indians who live in South Africa. One is a merchant class, that is merchant Indians, who went there on business. And then the other group of people being like Gandhi and others, who went there to work for the merchant class. Gandhi himself going there to work for a Mohammedan firm that invited him to tender legal advice. The other group of Indians who left for South Africa are called as the indentured Indians. These indentured Indians were recruited by the British after the abolition of slavery owing to the demand for labor, because most of the plantation industry that thrived in South Africa and other colonies, British colonies, required tremendous amount of labor, and then the Indians provided this labor. Who are these Indians? These Indians mostly were Dalits or Adivasis, coming either from Jharkhand, that is the provinces in and around Bengal, or colonial Madras. And these Indians were referred to as indentured Indians. They were also called, in a very demeaning way, as the coolies. Gandhi also had a serious issue with this use of the word coolies, not with the word coolies itself. However, Gandhi had an issue with the fact that Indians were all classed together as one. That is, the merchant Indians, the indentured Indians were classed as one whole and referred to by the whites, by the British, by the colonizers as coolies. The third group of Indians are the free Indians. Who are the free Indians? The free Indians are the ones who finish their indentured tenure after 5 years, all of whom become free. So they can marry, they can have children, they can go to schools, they can be employed elsewhere, they can also choose to return. Some of them chose to return, some of them didn't return. They continue to stay in South Africa. So these were the three classes of Indians who lived in South Africa, and Gandhi was in very close touch, as the book by Ghulam Bakr and Ashwin Desai, Gandhi, the stretcher bearer of the empire, suggests that Gandhi over the course of time became one of their greatest leaders while in South Africa. And he was also in very close, as his book, autobiography, his experiments with truth suggests that he had also hosted some of these people in his own house, because he refers to a Dalit man whose chamber, Kasturba, his wife, refused to clear up. So what about the condition of these indentured Indians? Joe Beer, for example, argues that most of these women worked in terrible conditions, and because they worked in terrible conditions in India, and this being a patriarchal society, they chose to be indentured, and therefore they wanted to migrate to natal or other colonies in order to improve their financial condition. Given the fact that most of these indentured women who migrated during this time were either widows or mostly prostitutes. The narratives of indentured were multiple. The voyage that they took was a great leveler of status, as put by Ghulam Bakr in his book, Inside Indian Indenture. Brinda Mehta, for example, suggests that widows and adolescent girls who migrated were sometimes found that they could have a free life and mingle freely because caste distinctions not play much of a role in the host society or in societies where they left from here. And even during their travel, even during their voyage on the ships, on the high seas, the Brahmins and the other communities found that their caste status did not find any relevance inside, because it was all about reaching their destination and finding a new life in a newfound place. What about the literature that is available on indentured laborers? So recently there is a book by Basmati Mukherjee. She is one of the foreign service officers who was an Indian representative of the UNESCO. And she has recently published a book titled Indentured and Their Root. So she explains how the indenture, the system of indenture shaped has a policy that again making the site historical so that humankind doesn't forget that there was a system called as indentured laborers where 500,000 arrived from India, the shores of Mauritius. So what is the relevance of M.K. Gandhi and the nationalist movement to the indentured laborers? So M.K. Gandhi, during his stay in South Africa, had a very close relationship, as I mentioned previously, with most of these Tamils, especially Dalits coming from colonial Madras. And one of his close associates then was Rettamala Srinivasan. Rettamala Srinivasan was someone who also went to attend the second round table conference with Gandhi in 1931. And Srinivasan took a very firm stance on separate electorates along with Gandhi. As we all know that Dr. Ambedkar wanted separate electorates for the Dalits. But Rettamala Srinivasan, along with Gandhi, he sided with Gandhi and he was of the view that separate electorates weren't going to really help the Dalits. And therefore, however, he felt that Dalits were not Hindus. So where does the question arise as to how can they help in upholding or in saving Hinduism from perishing, as Gandhi claimed? So he was one of the close associates of Gandhi. Usually, Gandhi was also of the opinion that most of the Dalits should be absorbed into the Hindu fold, and untouchability was the only problem that existed within the caste system that has to be addressed. And he was in favor of a Varna system, as we all understand. So what is the role of these indentured laborers? Given the fact that 500,000 of them went from India to work in indentured farms. So as the nationalist movement attains heat, and Madan Mohan Malviya, one of the legislators in the United Provinces, he convinces Gandhi after his return from India, return to India in 1950, that Gandhi should take up the cause of the indentured laborers. So he requests Gandhi to make a visit when he visits South Africa via Mauritius, and Gandhi makes a stop. He makes a stop at Mauritius, meets with the Arya Samaj movement leaders, meets with the indentured leaders, and then meets the indentured workers, and then they convince Gandhi that a resolution should be introduced in the Imperial Legislative Council by Madan Mohan Malviya that they will have to bring an end to the indentured labor. So finally, a bill is introduced in the legislature, bringing about an end to indentured labor. Now, I would like to conclude, or a few minutes, 5 minutes, to explain as to what seriously resulted, what was the reasons behind Gandhi and the nationalist leaders wanting an end to indentured laborers. As you all understand, these were years of two major world wars, and Gandhi was trying to mobilize Indian soldiers towards fighting wars for the British. And he was someone who believed that Indians should fight the wars for the British. He himself wrote so many letters to the British saying that being faithful servants of the British Empire, they would like to fight wars. Gandhi himself enrolled to fight the First World War, though he had fallen sick. This was when he was in South Africa. And during the Second World War, after Gandhi's return to India, he in fact tried to mobilize Indian soldiers towards this cause. But then we find that why was the nationalist leaders were in favor of Gandhi mobilizing troops for the First and the Second World War, but then why was he not in favor of sending indentured laborers to any of these British colonies? One of the reasons being that there was a huge labor shortage that was happening in India because of Dalits and Adivasis leaving this to work as indentured laborers to Mauritius, to South Africa, to the Caribbean, and hence educate the people about the evil effects of this system. This is one reason. The other reason being, if you look at the writings of Gandhians like Sumant Mehta, Indulal Yagnik, Nathari Parekh, these were close Gandhians who worked with Gandhi alongside in Western India. And in Western India, there was a system that thrived, which is called as the Dugla system. And this Dugla system was used to maintain Adivasis as slaves. And over a course of years, over generations, the Adivasis were incorporated into the caste system as the untouchables, against whom untouchability was widely practiced. And during the nationalist movement, when Gandhi launched his Satyagraha campaign in Bardoli, one of the places where he started his Satyagraha campaign in Western India, there was a need for the Adivasis to be included within the code of Hinduism. And therefore, Gandhi was of the view that, and none of these Gandhians, including Gandhi himself, did not openly speak about abolishing the system of Dugla or maintaining this or abolishing the system of semi-slavery that was practiced in Western India. And most of the cotton trade, the cotton merchants, thrived on this business, holding thousands of Adivasis as slaves. Why did he not fight it? As Indulal Yagnik in his book, Gandhi, the Man as I Know Him, says, this would have resulted in Gandhi losing the support of the Satyagrahis, because the Satyagrahis who led the campaign in Bardoli were themselves holding slaves. So these are some of the reasons which have not been dealt with in any book that I have come across on indentured labor, which I thought I will present it in this conference and in this paper. So to conclude, who are the Gilmenians? As you all understand, Gilmen is actually it's a pass that is given to the people when they are given this indenture, when they are actually indentured. So that is the reason why they are called as Gilmenians. And the other reason being the politics, the entire politics behind what we call as memorialization and reconciliation. So we see Indian nationalist leaders, not just Indian nationalist leaders, but even the present regime or the Indian diplomats and others talk about memorializing the indenture system as she recently does, as Ms. Mukherjee recently does in her book. We also find instances of indenture being described as such a cruel system which has to go. Of course, it has to go. But then we also find that there is this politics which is behind this whole debate on memorialization, where selectively there are certain groups which are being held out for memorialization, whereas the others aren't. And India, by the way, has not accepted and is unwilling to even use the term indigenous people for the Adivasis who have been held as slaves for generations. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Anand. You have really clarified the concept of indentured laborers. Many of you are struggling with this concept. And not only you clarified the concept, you gave all the ramifications and the plights of the indentured laborers at that time. It's really very tragic. At that time, the rulers of the day, they committed offences, they themselves testified and then justified. And that reminds me of the couplet. कि शहर तुम्हारा, कातिल तुम, शाहिद तुम, हाकिम तुम, मुझे यकीन है मेरा ही कसूर है. That's how they testify. So tragic. They committed all the crimes. But all the poor laborers from this place, innocent persons on the seaways, they were not aware of the journey, how they struggled, how they suffered, and then in the name of law, they justified. So you have everything in your head to do anything. Very good. Next, please.
Thank you, Dr. Bello, for your insightful session on India's indentured laborers. I would now like to request if there's a question and answers for this second academic session. Any question and answers? Any interjections?
Lectures are so well stated that.
I'll just make one observation. Since I served in Angola, Angola is an African country, very rich, currently in deep clutches with the dragons, with China. So when I was in Angola, I used to often wonder, common colonial past, we have Goa which was under Portuguese, हम एक ही विदेशी ताकत के नीचे रहे, हमारा गोवा राज्य था वो पोर्तुगीज के नीचे था, भाषा भी थी, क्षमता भी थी, हम बहुत कुछ कर सकते हैं, लेकिन हम कर क्या रहे थे वहाँ? हम वहाँ पर एक म्यूजियम बनाने की कोशिश कर रहे थे। जब बार बार हम लोगों को कहते थे कि भाई कुछ इकोनॉमिक कर लो, कुछ ऐसा कर लो जो कि आपको यहाँ पर एक स्थायित्व, एक रेलेवेंस दे दे, तो तमाशा हम लोग देखते रहते। तो क्या है कि हमको यथार्थवादी बनना पड़ेगा। We have to become practical, otherwise we have lost large parts of Africa to Chinese, and all of us, I also believe in culture, I also believe in soft power, and I am a beneficiary of that, but that money makes the bear go, and business makes things happen. Sorry.
We have been in Angola.
¿Cómo está? ¿Todo bien? ¿Habla un poco portugués?
Thank you, sir. You made a very relevant observation here in terms of how Chinese economic policy is actually having advantage not only in Africa and other countries also. Certainly in South Asia, India, here we can find that how the economic projects of China, either the depth of diplomacy and all, because it is very much visible in the present foreign policy that we are seeing that we are very much realistic policies we are having right now. If we see India, Israel-Palestine policy, though we are very much, stand on our earlier stand in terms of that two-state solution in Palestine and talking Middle East. In Africa also that made a very relevant point that this, because poverty is a very important factor in whole of Africa, and Chinese came to Africa just to uplift them from poverty to a normal life or to uplift their economy. So they were very much successful earlier by coming up with this kind of diplomacy, and later on what happened with the countries where they put their efforts, put their money. You just can take the example of Pakistan, for instance, that Pakistan has just become a colony just because there is enormous financial support to Pakistan for their projects and all, and this PRI project that went through the POK, so it is Balochistan area. So this is very relevant that we must pursue a realistic policy, because sometimes hard power not works, sometimes soft power not works, but we are very much smart enough now to deal with the affairs in international relations, and if it was happened earlier, then the situation might be changed in the present time, but we are very much optimistic that we are pursuing now a realistic foreign policy, I must say, because if anybody is making, putting finger on our issues like human rights and others, then we are now having courage to reply them. So I think it is very relevant point that a country must have goal not only in terms of culture, because culture plays a part, but economy, polity, these all are the important components for a strong power, and we are now heading towards Asian power or a world power. So we must pursue the policies that are best suited to our interests. Thank you very much.
I will now request everyone to please stand up for the Kul Geet of Delhi Vishwavidyalaya.
श्रेष्ठ सुंदर देव जिन सत्यम की मंगल की विभाओं का समागम।
जयति जय जय जयति जय जय ज्ञान का आलोक अनुपम।
भव्य महाविद्यालयों के परिसरों से चिर सुशोभित श्रेष्ठ गुरुजन कर रहे छात्र पहुंचा पाए दीक्षित।
सदचरित्राचार पावन साधना संकल्प संयुक्त।
नवल वैश्विक चेतना नव क्रांति संस्कारों का उद्गम। जयति जय जयति जय जय ज्ञान का आलोक अनुपम।
श्रेष्ठ सुंदर दिव्य दिल्ली विश्वविद्यालय दिगंबरम।
जयति जय जय जयति जय जय ज्ञान का आलोक अनुपम।
ज्ञान का आलोक अनुपम।
ज्ञान का आलोक अनुपम।
ज्ञान का आलोक अनुपम।
Thank you very much, everyone. I would like to thank our Honorable Professor A.B. Shukla sir for chairing this session in a very well assimilated manner. Thank you all the presenters, Professor Naveed Jamal sir, Professor Aslam Khan, Dr. Melita Hussain Sidido, Dr. Beryl Anand. Thank you very much all the presenters. Now we would wrap up and we will begin for the third academic session after the tea break. So I will request everyone to please come back as soon as possible after the tea break. Thank you very much. The tea break is for 15 to 20 minutes. Thank you. I request everyone to please come after the tea break at 5 sharp, at 5 p.m. sharp, and the tea is there besides the hall. Thank you very much.